Time has always been one of the greatest mysteries of the human experience. Long before we invented machines to measure it, long before clocks ticked on our walls or calendars hung in our kitchens, people everywhere looked upward to the sky and wondered how to make sense of the endless movement of days and nights. The rising of the sun, the path of the moon, and the slow procession of stars became the first language of time. And among the many civilizations that tried to understand this language, the ancient Maya stood apart. Their calendar system was not only a tool for counting days, but a philosophy, a way of seeing the universe, and a deep reflection of how human beings exist within the rhythm of the cosmos. Tonight we take a slow journey into their world. Imagine, if you will, sitting quietly under a vast Central American sky more than 1,000 years ago. The humid air is still, carrying the distant sound of insects and the crackle of a small fire. Above you, the night sky is alive with countless stars, brighter and clearer than most of us ever see today. For the Maya, this sky was not silent. It spoke in patterns, in alignments, in shifting movements. Each star, each phase of the moon, each eclipse was a message. The Maya believed that to live in harmony with the universe, one needed to listen carefully to these messages, to mark them, to weave them into cycles of understanding. From this careful observation grew one of the most complex systems of timekeeping ever developed. This is not a story of rushing events or dramatic battles. It is instead a gentle unfolding of knowledge, piece by piece, as the Maya observed the heavens and slowly shaped their world around it. Their calendar was not simply a tool to remember when to plant crops or when to celebrate a festival. It was a framework for life itself. It told rulers when to ascend their thrones, guided priests in choosing days for rituals, and helped ordinary families decide when to sow seeds in the earth. To understand the calendar is to understand how the Maya saw themselves, not as isolated beings but as part of an immense eternal cycle. When we today think of a calendar, most of us imagine squares on a page, a grid of weeks and months, numbers marching forward in neat rows. The Mayan calendar, however, was far more intricate. It was not just one calendar but a combination of several, each with its own cycle, its own rhythm, and its own meaning. Together, these calendars overlapped like gears in a great clock, turning in harmony, creating patterns that stretched far beyond a single human lifetime. As we begin this exploration, it is worth remembering that the Maya did not see time as a straight line from the past to the future. They saw it as a circle, a rhythm that repeated endlessly. Life, death, and rebirth were woven into this pattern. Just as the seasons return, just as the sun rises after night, time itself was a cycle without end. This worldview shaped their religion, their politics, and their daily existence. It is a perspective that feels both alien and strangely comforting to us today. To set the stage, consider the contrast between the modern way we experience time and the ancient Mayan approach. Today we measure time in precise units, seconds, minutes, hours. Our lives are often ruled by clocks that remind us of deadlines and schedules. But for the Maya, time was sacred. It was alive. Each day carried its own personality, its own spiritual essence. To wake on a particular day was to inherit its character, to be influenced by its meaning. Time was not simply something you moved through, it was something that moved through you. As the fire burns lower in our imagined Maya village, you might picture a priest looking up at the sky, tracing constellations with his eyes. He knows the stories hidden there, the cycles that repeat again and again. He knows that each movement of the heavens will one day return, echoing through generations. To him, keeping track of time is not about marking off days until the next harvest. It is about aligning human life with the eternal rhythm of the universe. The history of the Mayan calendar is in many ways the history of human curiosity. It shows how far people will go to make sense of the world around them. It reflects patience, for the calendar was not invented in a single year or even a single century. It was refined slowly, across generations as countless observers passed down their knowledge. The Maya watched the skies with dedication, and in doing so they left us a legacy that still sparks wonder today. This journey into the Mayan calendar will not be hurried. Like the cycles it describes, it will unfold gradually, moving from the broad sweep of history into the fine details of sacred numbers and cosmic patterns. Along the way, we will learn about the people who created it, the world they lived in, and the meaning they found in its cycles. And in doing so, we may also discover something about our own relationship with time, whether we see it as a relentless march or as a gentle flow that carries us from one moment to the next. So let us begin slowly, as the Maya themselves might have, by looking up at the night sky and listening to the silent rhythm of the universe. For in the end, the story of the Mayan calendar is not only about dates carved into stone or rituals performed in temples. It is about the human search for meaning in the passage of time, and as we drift further into this story, like the steady turning of the earth, we too may find a sense of calm in the endless cycles that connect us all. When we speak of the Maya, it is easy to think only of their calendar or of the great pyramids that still stand in silent testimony to their civilization. Yet before we can truly understand their way of measuring time, we must pause and gently picture the world in which they lived. To imagine their calendar without imagining their daily life would be like trying to hear a song without its melody. The Maya did not build their system of time in an empty place. They lived in thriving cities, dense jungles and fertile valleys surrounded by rhythms of nature that shaped every moment of existence. To understand their calendar, we must first see their world. The Maya lived across a broad region of Central America, stretching from the Yucatan Peninsula down through present-day Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and parts of El Salvador. It was a landscape of astonishing variety. On one day you might walk beneath the dense canopy of tropical rainforest where the air was thick and filled with the call of exotic birds. On another you might cross open savannas or climb into cool mountain highlands where mist drifted across the hills. Rivers wound their way through valleys, feeding fertile soil that sustained crops. Along the coasts the sea glittered in endless shades of blue. This world was alive with abundance, but it was also demanding. The climate brought both nourishing rains and periods of relentless drought. To live here required balance, foresight, and a close relationship with nature's cycles. Within this environment rose some of the greatest cities of the ancient world. Names like Tikal, Copan, Palenque, and Calakmul echo across history. To the modern eye, they were architectural wonders, towering stone pyramids, broad plazas, intricate palaces, and ball courts where sacred games were played. Yet for the people who built them, these cities were not simply centers of power. They were sacred spaces designed to reflect the harmony between the human world and the cosmos. The alignment of temples with the sun and stars was not accidental. Each structure was part of a grand design that connected the earthly realm with the heavens above. Life in these cities followed a steady rhythm. The majority of the Maya were farmers working the land with simple but effective tools. They grew maize, beans, squash, and chili peppers, crops that formed the foundation of their diet. Maize in particular held special meaning. It was more than food, it was life itself. According to Maya mythology, humans were fashioned from corn by the gods, their flesh shaped from its dough. Each planting season, each harvest was not only a practical necessity but also a sacred act, an echo of creation. In this way, time and agriculture were inseparable. The movement of days determined when seeds would enter the soil and when families would gather to bring in the fruits of their labor. Beyond the fields, the Maya were skilled artisans and traders. Markets bustled with the exchange of obsidian blades, jade ornaments, woven textiles, and cacao beans, which were valued not only as food but as currency. The hum of daily commerce was itself a rhythm of time. The rise of the sun brought trade, the setting sun brought rest, and each day carried its own balance of work and ritual. Religion was woven into every layer of life. The Maya believed that the gods shaped not only the world but also the passing of each day. Every sunrise and every sunset was a divine event. Priests held the responsibility of interpreting these sacred patterns, guiding their people through ceremonies that aligned human life with cosmic order. Temples resounded with chants and the smell of incense. Offerings were made and calendars were consulted to ensure that each ritual fell upon the proper day. This spiritual rhythm, as much as the agricultural cycle, defined the heartbeat of Maya society. Family life carried its own cycles. Children learned from their parents, following traditions passed down through countless generations. Stories of gods and heroes were told by firelight, keeping memory alive and binding communities together. As the seasons changed, so too did the festivals and gatherings that brought villages together. These events marked not just the passing of time but also the renewal of social bonds. Birth, marriage, and death were not isolated events but moments folded into the larger cycle of existence. When we look back, it can be tempting to imagine the Maya as distant and mysterious, yet in truth their lives held familiar rhythms. They rose with the sun, worked with their hands, gathered with loved ones, and rested as the stars emerged. The difference lies not in the presence of these patterns but in how deeply they believed them to be connected with the universe itself. Every choice, every day, every cycle of planting and harvesting was measured against a cosmic order reflected in their calendars. This balance between the practical and the spiritual is what makes the Maya so fascinating. Their environment demanded attentiveness, rains had to be predicted, droughts prepared for, and the growing season carefully observed. Yet rather than treat these challenges as mere obstacles, they wove them into a larger story of creation and renewal. Their calendars did not only help them survive, they helped them find meaning. To wake up on a particular day was not simply to mark another sunrise but to step into a moment with its own character, its own role in the ongoing cycle of time. So as we prepare to step deeper into the intricacies of the Mayan calendar itself, we must carry with us this vision of their world. A world where jungle canopies sheltered vast cities, where maize fields stretched under the sun, where priests studied the stars from temple tops, and where every human life was a thread in the grand pattern of time. To know the Maya calendar, one must first know the Maya people, people who lived close to the earth, close to the sky, and deeply aware that their lives moved in harmony with forces far greater than themselves. In the next stage of our journey, we will begin to see how this awareness shaped their first steps in recording time. Just as their fields required steady care, so too did their observations of the heavens. And slowly, from the quiet attention of countless generations, the great system of Mayan timekeeping began to take form. Time, in its earliest sense, was never something abstract. It was felt in the warmth of the sun on one's skin, in the fading of shadows at dusk, and in the predictable cycle of the moon. Every culture, long before clocks and written calendars, relied on these natural signs to understand where they stood in the endless flow of existence. The Maya were not unique in their desire to track time, but what made them remarkable was how deeply and carefully they refined this practice, creating a system that connected heaven, earth, and human life in ways few other civilizations achieved. To grasp how their unique calendar came into being, it helps to take a slow step back and look at the wider story of early timekeeping across the world. For early human communities, survival depended on noticing patterns. Hunters observed the migration of animals and knew that certain herds returned at certain times of year. Gatherers understood that fruits ripened with the seasons. Farmers in particular needed to pay close attention to the sun and rain. They could not simply plant seeds whenever they wished, they had to wait for the earth to be ready. In this sense, the heavens became a guidebook, offering reliable signs for when to sow, when to harvest, and when to prepare for scarcity. Different societies around the globe built their own systems of observation. The ancient Egyptians measured time through the rising of the star Sirius, which signaled the flooding of the Nile and brought fertile soil to their fields. In Mesopotamia, priests charted the movements of planets and stars, developing some of the earliest astronomical records in history. Stone circles in Britain and Europe may have been used to mark solstices and equinoxes, ensuring that communities stayed aligned with the seasonal cycle. All of these efforts reflect the same truth. Humans needed a rhythm, a reliable sense of order to make sense of a world that otherwise seemed unpredictable. The Maya entered into this long human tradition with remarkable dedication. Living in a land where the rainy season could bring life but also devastation, they had to be keenly aware of the sky's messages. The sun's path, the phases of the moon, and the appearance of Venus all became essential markers. Unlike some cultures that saw the heavens as distant and detached, the Maya saw them as intimately connected with daily life. Each celestial event carried significance. A certain star appearing on the horizon might signal the beginning of planting. The disappearance of another might warn of the coming dry season. Observing the skies was not a choice, it was a necessity for both survival and meaning. Imagine a Maya priest standing atop a stone platform at dawn. The jungle below is heavy with mist, and the first rays of light stretch across the horizon. He watches carefully, noting where the sun rises. Over time, such observations reveal a pattern. The sun does not rise in exactly the same place each day, but shifts along the horizon with the seasons. By marking these shifts with carved stones or architectural alignments, the Maya could track the passage of time with astonishing precision. What might seem to us like a casual sunrise was, to them, a key in unlocking the structure of the universe. The moon offered its own rhythm. Its phases, waxing and waning in a cycle of about 29.5 days, were followed closely. Eclipses in particular held deep meaning. To us they might appear as curious astronomical events, but to the Maya they were dramatic moments in which the balance of the cosmos shifted, demanding rituals and ceremonies to restore harmony. Venus, too, became a celestial guide. Its brilliant appearance as the morning or evening star was carefully recorded, tied to predictions of war, rulership, and religious events. For the Maya, the sky was alive with messages, and it was their responsibility to read them. From this patient watching, systems of counting days began to emerge. At first it might have been as simple as tracking moons or seasons, but as generations passed, the Maya refined their records, creating not just one cycle but many, layered together. They did not settle for a single way of marking time. Instead, they wove multiple calendars into a complex but elegant system. Some cycles were short, guiding daily rituals. Others were long, stretching across centuries, framing human history within cosmic events. Each layer added depth, like the rings of a tree, showing growth and continuity across time. It is important to remember that the Mayan approach to time was not purely practical. In the modern world, we often separate science from spirituality as though they are two different ways of seeing. For the Maya, there was no such division. Observing the sky was both scientific and sacred. Measuring the length of a year was an act of devotion. Recording cycles of the moon was a way of honoring the gods who governed them. In this way, their calendar became more than a tool. It became a bridge between human existence and divine order. This blending of practicality and spirituality can be seen in how their calendar influenced every corner of life. Farmers consulted it to know when to plant maize. Rulers consulted it to decide when to hold ceremonies of power. Priests used it to choose auspicious days for rituals, ensuring that offerings were made at the proper time. Even ordinary families felt its influence, for each day carried a particular character, and a child born on one day might be thought to inherit qualities different from a child born on another. Time itself had personality, and the calendar gave shape to that living presence. Slowly across centuries, the system grew more complex, more precise, more deeply woven into society. It was no longer just a matter of marking when the rains might come. It became a way of understanding life's deeper cycles, birth, death, and rebirth, repeating again and again, as certain as the return of the sun after night. The Maya were not content to see time as something fleeting. They wanted to capture its rhythm, to name its days, and to understand its vast unfolding. When we compare this to our modern sense of time, the contrast is striking. Today we often treat time as a resource, something to manage, something that runs out. We hurry through minutes and hours, always aware of the ticking clock. The Maya, by contrast, saw time as a companion. It was not a force to be fought against, but a rhythm to be lived within. Their calendars were not reminders of scarcity but guides to harmony. In this perspective, time was less about pressure and more about balance, a lesson that feels quietly profound even to us today. Thus, the birth of timekeeping among the Maya was not a single invention but a slow blossoming nurtured by countless observers and generations. It grew from the simple recognition of patterns in the sky into a vast system that shaped an entire civilization. This foundation prepared the way for their most extraordinary creations, the harb, the tozken, and the interlocking systems that defined their view of the cosmos. As we move forward, we will step deeper into these calendars themselves, beginning with the solar cycle that guided daily and seasonal life. But before we go there, it is worth pausing to remember that it all began with simple observations: a sunrise, a moonrise, a star that appeared and disappeared with the seasons. From such quiet moments, the great Mayan vision of time was born. When we think of a calendar today, the most familiar version is one that follows the sun. Our months and years are built around the Earth's orbit, giving us a 365-day cycle that begins anew each January. For the ancient Maya too, the sun was a vital guide. Its rising and setting shaped the rhythm of daily life, and its journey across the seasons marked the passage of the year. Out of their careful observations of the solar cycle, they created what we now call the Hab, a calendar of 365 days that was at once practical, spiritual, and deeply symbolic. To understand it is to step into the everyday heartbeat of Maya civilization. The Hab was a solar calendar of remarkable structure. It consisted of 18 months, each lasting 20 days, making 360 days in total. To this, the Maya added 5 extra days at the end of the year, a short period known as Weber. These 5 days were seen as unusual, even dangerous, a kind of gap in the order of time. For now, let us set them aside and look more closely at the core of the Hab. Each of the 18 months had its own name, its own character, and its own place in the cycle of the year. For example, there was Pop, which marked the beginning of the year, a time associated with leadership and renewal. There was Wal, Sip, Solstices, Seek, and so on, each carrying meanings that blended the practical and the sacred. Some months were linked with planting, others with harvest, still others with rituals and ceremonies. To live within the Hab was to live with a sense of order, as though the turning of days was a great wheel that never ceased to move. Within each month, the 20 days were counted using a sequence of glyphs, each representing a number from 0 to 19. The Maya, unlike many other ancient peoples, used the concept of zero, a mathematical insight that allowed them to measure time with extraordinary precision. In practice, this meant that each day of the Hab could be identified with a combination of its month name and its number. One might say, for example, that a certain event happened on the 10th day of Pop or the 15th day of Sotsi. This system created a clear structure for recording time, one that could extend across generations and preserve the memory of important events. But the Hab was not only a record-keeping tool, it was deeply tied to the cycles of nature. The Maya were an agricultural people, and the success of their crops determined whether they would flourish or suffer. Maize, their staple food, depended on careful timing. Planting too early or too late could spell disaster. By following the Hab, farmers knew when the rains were most likely to come, when the soil was ready, and when to expect the harvest. Each month brought its own tasks, its own responsibilities, and its own blessings. In this way, the calendar was not an abstract system but a living guide to survival. Imagine, then, the life of a Maya farmer. At the start of the planting season, he rises with the sun, consults the calendar, and knows that the time is right to prepare the fields. With his family and neighbors, he places maize seeds into the soil, trusting that the cycle of time, faithfully measured by the Hab, will bring the rains as it always has. Months later, when the harvest season arrives, he gathers the ripened maize, giving thanks in ceremonies that align with the calendar's sacred days. Through this steady rhythm, life gains predictability and meaning. Yet the Hab also carried layers of spiritual significance. Each month, each day, was thought to be infused with a kind of energy shaped by the gods who governed the cycles of time. The priests, who acted as intermediaries between the people and the divine, read the calendar not only for practical guidance but also for spiritual meaning. They could declare a day auspicious for rituals, for coronations, or for community gatherings. They could also warn against unfavorable times when the gods' favor was uncertain. In this way, the Hab shaped not only farming but politics, religion, and social life. Now let us return to the 5 final days, the Weiba. These days were seen as outside the normal order, a kind of liminal period when the boundaries between worlds grew thin. The Maya regarded them with caution. People believed that the gods withdrew their protection during this brief interval, leaving humans vulnerable to misfortune. Daily activities slowed, rituals of protection were performed, and people waited patiently for the new year to begin. It was a reminder that time itself was not always steady. It had edges, moments of uncertainty where order gave way to chaos before being restored again. This sense of unease might strike us as strange today, but it reflects the profound way in which the Maya experienced time. For them, the calendar was not simply a grid of numbers, it was alive, with moments of harmony and moments of imbalance, all woven into the great cycle of existence. To move through the Hab was to move through a landscape of meaning, where each day carried its own character and power. Archaeologists and scholars today can trace the workings of the Hab through inscriptions carved into stone, painted on pottery, and written in surviving codices. On temple walls we find dates recorded with precision, marking coronations of kings, dedication of monuments, or important rituals. Each of these events was anchored in time, not as a fleeting memory but as part of a larger cycle that would repeat endlessly. In this way, the Hab provided a bridge between human action and cosmic order, ensuring that what was done on Earth was aligned with the heavens. What is perhaps most remarkable is the sense of stability this calendar offered. For centuries, the Hab guided the Maya through cycles of abundance and hardship, prosperity and decline. Even when droughts struck or conflicts arose, the calendar continued to turn, a reminder that time itself was greater than any single human challenge. In its steady movement, people could find reassurance, knowing that after the rains came the harvest, and after hardship came renewal. As we reflect on the Hab, it becomes clear that this was more than a calendar. It was a worldview, a rhythm that shaped the daily lives of millions. Its structure of 18 months and 5 special days gave a sense of completeness, mirroring the cycles of the sun itself. To the Maya, living within this structure meant living in harmony with the natural order, guided by both necessity and reverence. In our modern world, where calendars are often seen as tools of efficiency, it can be calming to remember that the Heb was a reminder of balance. It was a system that helped people live with the rhythms of nature rather than against them, offering a sense of continuity that stretched far beyond the concerns of any single day. And as we move deeper into the story of Mayan timekeeping, we will see how this solar calendar joined with other cycles to create a tapestry of time more intricate and mysterious than any other in the ancient world. If the Heb was the calendar of the sun and the seasons, guiding the cycles of planting and harvest, then the Solstice was something different, something more mysterious. It was not a calendar tied to the solar year, nor was it designed to mirror the visible cycles of nature. Instead, the Solstice was a sacred rhythm, a cycle of 260 days that the Maya believed revealed the spiritual essence of time. It was a calendar that shaped rituals, defined destiny, and carried profound meaning for every person born beneath its count. While the Heb reflected the practical world of fields and seasons, the Solstice reflected the unseen world of gods, spirits, and cosmic order. Together they formed two halves of a whole, the material and the spiritual, the earthly and the divine. The Solstice consisted of 260 days, arranged in an elegant system that combined numbers and symbols. At its core, the calendar was based on a cycle of 20 named days, each with its own glyph and meaning, paired with a cycle of 13 numbers. The days advanced in sequence, 1 imix, 2 ik, 3 ekbul, and so on, moving through the names and numbers in a steady rhythm. When the 13th number was reached, the count of numbers began again, while the sequence of day names continued. This overlapping of cycles created 260 unique combinations, and when the last was completed, the cycle began anew. To our modern minds, a 260-day calendar might seem unusual. It does not match the solar year, nor the lunar cycle, nor any obvious astronomical pattern. Scholars have long debated its origin. Some suggest it may be tied to the cycle of Venus, a planet of deep importance to the Maya. Others note that 260 days is roughly the length of human gestation, suggesting a link to fertility and the rhythms of life itself. It is also possible that the number arose from agricultural cycles connected to the timing of planting and harvest in certain regions of Mesoamerica. Whatever its roots, for the Maya, the Solstice carried spiritual weight, and it endured for centuries as one of the most important measures of time. Each of the 20-day names was infused with meaning. Imix was associated with water and beginnings, Ik with breath and spirit, Ikbul with darkness and the unknown. Other days evoked animals, elements or sacred concepts. Kan was linked to maize, Chikchan to the serpent, Ix to the jaguar, Kawak to the storm. These were not abstract symbols but living forces, shaping the character of the day and influencing the destiny of those born upon it. To say that a child was born on a certain day in the Solstice was to say something about their essence, their strengths, and their challenges. Time in this sense was not neutral. It carried personality, and every human being was bound to it. The role of the priest was central in interpreting the Solstice. Known as daykeepers, these spiritual guides carried the knowledge of the calendar and used it to advise their communities. When a child was born, parents might consult a priest to learn what the day of birth foretold. Was the day favorable, associated with strength and wisdom, or was it challenging, connected to struggle or misfortune? Rituals could then be performed to honor the gods and bring balance to the child's life. In this way, the Solstice shaped not only ceremonies and festivals but also personal identity. It told each person where they fit within the cosmic order. The Solstice was also the foundation for rituals and festivals throughout the year. Specific days were chosen for offerings, for bloodletting ceremonies, for the dedication of monuments, or for the ascension of rulers. These choices were not arbitrary, they were tied to the character of the day as revealed by the Solstice. A ruler might time his coronation to fall on a day associated with power and stability, ensuring divine favor for his reign. A community might celebrate a festival of renewal on a day linked to fertility and abundance. By aligning human actions with the sacred rhythm of the calendar, the Maya believed they could maintain harmony between the human world and the gods. To better imagine how the Tansolkan worked, picture a great wheel with 20 spokes, each one representing a day name. Inside it, a smaller wheel with 13 notches turns alongside. As the wheels rotate, each spoke meets each notch in sequence, creating a new combination. After 260 turns, the pattern repeats, and the wheels begin again. This mechanical metaphor captures the elegance of the system, simple in concept but vast in implication. It offered an unending cycle, a rhythm that continued long after any single human life had passed. The influence of the Tansolkan extended beyond ceremonies and personal destiny. It was also a tool for divination. Priests consulted the calendar to predict outcomes, to determine when to begin journeys, or to decide when to wage war. The gods were thought to speak through the pattern of days, and by listening closely, humans could glimpse the shape of what was to come. In this sense, the Tansolkan was a bridge between the present and the future, a way of navigating uncertainty through the steady rhythm of sacred time. While the Harb tied human life to the visible world of seasons and harvests, the Tansolkan reminded the Maya that life was also part of a greater, unseen order. It told them that time was not just something that passed but something alive, with moods, qualities and spirits. To live without acknowledging this rhythm would have been, to the Maya, to live out of balance. Only by honoring both calendars, the solar and the sacred, could one truly live in harmony with the cosmos. Even today, the Tansolkan has not vanished. Among Maya communities in Guatemala and southern Mexico, daykeepers still keep the count, performing rituals on specific days, interpreting the character of time and guiding their people. In this continuity, we see the resilience of an ancient system that has outlived empires, colonization, and centuries of change. The rhythm of 260 days still turns as steady and mysterious as it did more than 1,000 years ago. As we pause to reflect on the Tansolkan, it becomes clear that the Maya did not see time in the way most of us do. To us, a day is often just a unit of scheduling, a square on a calendar, a number to help us keep track of appointments. To the Maya, a day was a being, a force, something with power and meaning. The Tansolkan was a way of naming and honoring these forces, ensuring that human life moved in step with the deeper rhythm of the universe. In the stillness of the jungle night, as priests lit fires and whispered prayers, they were not simply marking the passage of days, they were listening to the heartbeat of time itself. And so the Tansolkan complemented the Harb, forming a pair of cycles that would soon interlock into something even greater. The sacred rhythm of 260 days, combined with the solar rhythm of 365, created a system known as the calendar round, a cycle that bound together the practical and the spiritual, the earthly and the divine. To explore that next is to see how the Maya wove their calendars into an even more intricate tapestry, one that reflected both human life and the vast eternity of time. When we bring the Hab and the Telzin together, something remarkable happens. Alone, each calendar has its rhythm, one following the seasons of the sun, and the other following the sacred count of 260 days. But when they turn side by side, like two great gears meshing together, they create a cycle far larger and more profound than either alone. This interlocking pattern is called the calendar round, and it reveals the Maya's genius for weaving together the threads of the earthly and the divine. The calendar round is formed by aligning the Hab and the Telzin. A given day is defined not only by its position in the 365-day solar year but also by its position in the 260-day sacred count. Because these two cycles are of different lengths, they rarely match exactly. But after 18,980 days or 52 solar years, the two calendars come back into alignment, and the same day combination repeats. This 52-year cycle was one of the most significant measures of time for the Maya, representing the span of a human lifetime and the rhythm of renewal across generations. To imagine how this worked, one might picture two wheels turning together. The larger wheel is the Hab, carrying its 365 spokes for each day of the solar year. The smaller wheel is the Telzin, with its 260 spokes of sacred days. As the wheels turn, their teeth interlock, forming new patterns day after day. It takes many turns before the same two teeth meet again, and when they do, a great cycle is completed. In this imagery we see not only mathematics but also poetry, a vision of time as a dance between cycles, ever moving, ever renewing. The calendar round served as the basis for naming dates in everyday life. To describe an event, one would give both the Telzin date and the Hab date together, such as 4 Behar, 8 Kumku. This combination uniquely identified a day within the 52-year span. For most people, this was more than enough, since it covered the events of their lifetime and beyond. The calendar round gave structure to history and memory, anchoring human experience within the cycles of both the visible world and the sacred realm. But the calendar round was not only a tool of record, it was also a framework of meaning. The 52-year cycle carried symbolic weight, representing renewal and the fragile balance of the cosmos. At the end of each round, the Maya performed rituals to ensure the continuation of time itself. It was believed that the completion of a cycle was a moment of danger, when the world might fall into disorder unless the gods were properly honored. Fires were extinguished and relit, offerings were made, and prayers were spoken to carry the world safely into the next cycle. In this way, the turning of the calendar round was not only mathematical precision but also sacred drama. The number 52 itself took on great importance. It was seen as a measure of completeness, the time it took for the two calendars to reconcile their differences and find harmony once again. For the Maya, this span marked the rhythm of human life, the bridge between generations. A child born at the beginning of a round might live to see its end, and in that return a sense of continuity was felt. Time was not simply fleeting but repeating, offering the possibility of renewal and balance. The calendar round also influenced architecture, ritual, and the planning of cities. Temples and monuments were often aligned with celestial events, but they were also dedicated on dates of significance within the round. When rulers built new structures, they did so not only to display power but to anchor their reign within the sacred cycles of time. By connecting their achievements to the calendar round, they bound their legacy to the harmony of the cosmos. Even today, when we study the inscriptions left on stelae and monuments, we see the calendar round at work. Dates carved in stone tell us when rulers were enthroned, when wars were fought, when cities were founded, or when offerings were made to the gods. These inscriptions are more than historical records, they are echoes of a worldview in which time itself was sacred, in which every action carried weight because it was part of a greater rhythm. What makes the calendar round especially striking is its balance between simplicity and complexity. On one hand, it is a natural product of two interlocking cycles, on the other it represents an understanding of time that blends practicality and spirituality in a way that few cultures have matched. It is at once a farmer's almanac and a priest's oracle, a tool for recording the past and a guide for ensuring the future. In its turning, the Maya saw not only the passage of days but the unfolding of destiny, and so the calendar round stands as a reminder of how the Maya lived between two worlds. Their lives were bound to the earth, to the sowing of maize and the coming of rains. Yet they also lived within a sacred order, where every day had a spirit, and every cycle carried meaning. By bringing these together, the Maya created not only a calendar but a vision of life itself, a vision where the human and the divine are inseparable. As we move forward, we will see that the Maya did not stop with the calendar round. For while it measured human lifetimes and the renewal of generations, there was also a need for something greater, a way to reckon with the vast stretches of time beyond memory, beyond history. To meet this need, they devised the long count, a system that could measure not only centuries but millennia, placing humanity within the grand scale of cosmic time. When the Hab and the Telkin came together to form the calendar round, the Maya gained a cycle that was both practical and sacred, a rhythm that defined lifetimes and linked generations. Yet even this profound system had its limits. The calendar round could uniquely name any day within a span of 52 years, but what about events beyond that? How could one record the founding of a city centuries earlier, or a prophecy meant to unfold far into the future? The Maya, with their extraordinary sense of time, sought an answer that would extend beyond the bounds of human memory. That answer was the long count, a calendar system capable of measuring time across thousands of years, placing human history against the vast canvas of cosmic cycles. The long count worked by counting days in a linear fashion, beginning from a fixed starting point. Unlike the repeating cycles of the Telkin and the Hab, the long count provided a continuous tally, one that moved forward endlessly. The starting point was set at what the Maya believed to be the date of creation, a moment when the current world was born. This beginning was not merely symbolic but precise, corresponding in our modern calendar to August 11, 3114 BCE. From that day onward, the long count recorded each passing day, building a framework for history that stretched back to mythic origins. The structure of the long count reflected the Mayas' mathematical brilliance. It was based on a vigesimal or base 20 system, with some modifications to align with the solar year. Days or kin formed the smallest unit. 20 kin made 1 unol, roughly equivalent to a month. 18 unol created 1 ton, a period of 360 days, close to a solar year. 20 ton formed a kinton, a span of about 20 years, while 20 kinton made a bakton, approximately 394 years. These units stacked upon one another like building blocks, allowing the Maya to calculate time across millennia with remarkable precision. A date in the long count was expressed through these units in sequence. For example, a monument might record the date 9, 12, 2016, with each number corresponding to a count of bakton, kinton, tun, unol, and kin. To the untrained eye, such numbers might appear abstract, but to the Maya they were markers in the unfolding story of the cosmos. Each number placed an event within the great flow of time, giving it context and meaning within the cycles of creation. The long count gave the Maya an extraordinary sense of perspective. It allowed them to trace their rulers and dynasties not just across decades but across centuries, linking the present to a mythic past. When a king was enthroned, scribes carved not only the date of the event but also its relation to earlier cycles, showing how the ruler's reign fit into the grand unfolding of time. This practice imbued kingship with sacred weight, presenting rulers not as isolated figures but as participants in a cosmic drama stretching back to the dawn of creation. What makes the long count especially striking is that it reflects a conception of time unlike our own. For many modern societies, time is linear and forward-moving, stretching into the future with no clear endpoint. For the Maya, time was cyclical and regenerative, with worlds created and destroyed in great cosmic ages. The long count allowed them to record these cycles, to map the flow of creation and destruction, and to place human events within this larger pattern. To inscribe a date was to situate an event not just in human history but in cosmic history, a reminder that the world itself was bound to cycles far larger than any single life or kingdom. The monuments that carry long count inscriptions still stand today, scattered across the forests of Mesoamerica. Carved into stone stelae, temple walls and staircases, they record not only the deeds of rulers but also the turning of time itself. These inscriptions are dense with meaning, names of kings, records of rituals, but always anchored in the unyielding framework of the long count. To stand before one of these monuments is to glimpse the Maya's profound respect for time, their desire to leave a record that would endure long after their own lives had passed. The long count also reflected a sense of continuity between myth and reality. The date of creation itself was not some distant abstraction but the starting point for history as the Maya understood it. By placing their lives and events in relation to this moment, they affirmed their connection to the gods who shaped the world. In this sense, every long count date was more than a number. It was a statement of belonging, an acknowledgement that humanity was woven into the very fabric of creation. It is worth pausing to imagine how it must have felt to live within such a framework. To be told that one's ruler had been enthroned on a day precisely counted from the dawn of creation, that one's community was participating in cycles stretching back thousands of years would have been both humbling and awe-inspiring. Time was not small, not fleeting, but immense, echoing with the footsteps of gods and ancestors alike. For the Maya, the long count ensured that their place in this vastness would not be forgotten. The most famous feature of the long count in modern times is of course its association with the year 2012. When scholars translated Maya inscriptions, they discovered references to the completion of the 13th Bakton, a cycle of roughly 5,125 years, ending in December 2012. This sparked widespread speculation that the Maya predicted the end of the world on that date. In truth, the Maya did not imagine a catastrophic apocalypse in our sense of the word. Rather, the end of a Bakton marked the close of one great cycle and the beginning of another. It was a moment of renewal, a transition, much like the completion of a calendar round, but on a vastly larger scale. The fascination with 2012 reflects how modern minds struggle to grasp the Maya concept of time. We tend to see dates as markers that pass by and fade, while the Maya saw them as part of a rhythm that repeats endlessly. The The 13th Bacton was not the end of time but a turning point in an ongoing cycle, one that reminded humanity of its place within a cosmos that is always in motion. By inscribing this cycle into stone, the Maya ensured that their vision of time would endure long after their cities had fallen silent. The long count, then, is not only a tool of chronology but also a philosophy. It tells us that time is vast, that human life is but a moment in an eternal cycle, and that to live meaningfully is to situate oneself within this greater order. It is a calendar, yes, but also a mirror of the cosmos, a way of seeing the world that blends mathematics, mythology, and spirituality into a single whole. As we reflect on the long count, we begin to understand the Maya's unique vision of time. They were not content to measure the days of a year or the span of a lifetime. They reached further, seeking to map the cycles of creation itself. Through their calendars they gave shape to history, to destiny, and to the endless turning of the universe. And in doing so, they left behind not only a record of their own civilization but a reminder to us of the depth and mystery of time. To understand the Maya calendar fully, one must also understand that it was never just a tool for marking time. It was deeply intertwined with the sacred, with gods, stars, planets, and rituals that sought to keep the universe in balance. For the Maya, time itself was divine. Each day carried the influence of supernatural forces, and each cycle reflected the ongoing dialogue between the human world and the cosmic order. In this way, astronomy, mythology, and ritual were not separate fields of knowledge, but parts of the same whole, seamlessly united in the living fabric of time. The gods who ruled over time were many, and they appeared in different guises across myths, carvings, and codices. Some were benevolent, guiding humanity with order and fertility, while others were more unpredictable, associated with storms, darkness, or war. Every day in the Tulsan was linked to a deity or force, and to live within the calendar was to live within the presence of these beings. Time itself was seen as a gift of the gods, and humans bore the responsibility of honoring it through ceremony. To neglect these rituals was to risk imbalance, to invite disorder into both society and the cosmos. Astronomy played a vital role in how the Maya structured their rituals and understood divine will. They were keen observers of the heavens, carefully recording the movements of the sun, the moon, and the planets. Among these celestial bodies, Venus held special importance. Its cycle of 584 days was tracked with meticulous precision, and its appearances as morning star and evening star were woven into myths of warfare, sacrifice, and renewal. Venus was often associated with the god Kukulkan or Quetzalcoatl in other Mesoamerican traditions, a deity who embodied both creation and destruction. When Venus rose, it was a signal for rituals, sometimes even for the timing of battles. The calendar was the key that connected the visible dance of the heavens with the unseen will of the gods. The moon, too, played a central role. Its phases were tracked for agricultural purposes but also for rituals of fertility and prophecy. The Maya noted eclipses with awe, seeing them as moments when cosmic balance was tested, times requiring offerings and ceremonies to restore harmony. The sun, of course, was the great regulator of its yearly journey, marking the flow of seasons. Solstices and equinoxes were moments of power, often aligned with temple structures so that light would fall in precise ways on sacred stairways or altars. To witness the sun illuminating a temple on the day of the equinox was not merely an astronomical event, it was a reminder of the unity between the divine and the human, the eternal and the fleeting. Ritual was the means by which humans engaged with this cosmic order. Priests, often trained from youth, served as the keepers of the calendar, the interpreters of time. They were not merely mathematicians or astronomers, though they excelled in both. They were mediators between the people and the gods, responsible for ensuring that rituals were performed on the correct days, that offerings were made when the calendar demanded it, and that balance was preserved. These rituals ranged from simple prayers and offerings of food to more elaborate ceremonies involving incense, music, dance, and even bloodletting. Bloodletting was one of the most important rituals in the Maya world. By drawing blood from their bodies, rulers and priests offered part of their own life force back to the gods, ensuring the continuation of cosmic cycles. Such acts were often timed according to the calendar, performed on days of particular significance. The shedding of blood was seen as a renewal of the covenant between humans and deities, a way of keeping the universe alive. Even warfare, in this sense, carried a ritual dimension as captives taken in battle could become offerings, their fates aligned with the demands of the calendar. Everyday rituals also followed the rhythm of the Tulsan and the Hab. Farmers planted maize not just when the rains arrived but when the calendar marked it as auspicious. Festivals were held in honor of deities tied to specific months of the Hab, each with its own offerings, dances and songs. These ceremonies were community events, reinforcing social bonds while simultaneously reaffirming cosmic harmony. The calendar provided not only structure to time but structure to society, guiding both the cycles of crops and the cycles of faith. One of the most striking ways the Maya expressed the union of astronomy, gods, and ritual was through their architecture. Temples and pyramids were not built at random. They were aligned with celestial events designed so that the movements of the sun, moon, or Venus would interact with the structures in dramatic ways. The most famous example is the Pyramid of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza, where during the equinox the setting sun casts shadows that resemble a serpent slithering down the staircase. To the Maya, this was not a coincidence of light and shadow but a deliberate union of human craftsmanship and cosmic rhythm, a manifestation of the god descending to earth. Architecture became a form of ritual in stone, permanently binding the city to the heavens. The interplay of astronomy and ritual also gave the Maya a sense of order in times of uncertainty. When drought threatened crops or when war loomed, the calendar was consulted. Priests interpreted the days, searching for guidance from the gods. By performing the proper rituals at the proper times, the Maya believed they could restore balance, invite rain, or secure victory. This faith in the calendar as a mediator of divine will gave structure to both personal and communal life, transforming the uncertainties of existence into patterns that could be understood and acted upon. To modernize, these rituals and beliefs may seem distant, but they reveal something profound about the human need to find meaning in time. For the Maya, time was not an empty backdrop against which life unfolded. It was alive, filled with power, shaped by the gods. To honor it was to live in harmony with the cosmos. To neglect it was to risk chaos. Every ritual, every astronomical observation, every inscription in stone was part of this ongoing dialogue between humanity and the divine. The persistence of these traditions is remarkable. Even today, among Maya-descended communities in Guatemala and Mexico, daykeepers still interpret the Tulsan, offering guidance based on the sacred count of days. Rituals tied to agricultural cycles continue, blending ancient practices with modern faiths. The gods, the stars and the cycles of time remain present, carried forward through memory and practice. The calendar, once carved into stone and aligned with pyramids, still shapes lives in ways both subtle and profound. Reflecting on this, one begins to see that the Maya calendars were never just about keeping track of time. They were about situating humanity within the vast, mysterious order of the cosmos. They were about ensuring that every act, from planting a seed to crowning a king, resonated with divine rhythm. Through gods, astronomy and rituals, the Maya transformed time into a living force, one that bound together earth and sky, human and divine, past and future. And as the long count reached into the deep past and stretched toward the far future, these rituals ensured that every turning of the cycle was met with reverence. In the Maya world, time was not simply endured but celebrated, honored, and kept alive through the careful blending of science, faith, and tradition. This vision of time as sacred order reveals a civilization that saw itself not at the center of the cosmos, but as a humble part of it, bound by duty to maintain the balance of creation. In recent memory, the Maya calendar entered global consciousness in a way that the ancient scribes could never have imagined. For much of the 20th century, scholars slowly pieced together the workings of the long count, translating glyphs and correlating dates with our modern calendar. Among their findings was the recognition that the 13th Bacton, a great cycle of the long count, would end in December of 2012. What followed was a wave of speculation, myth-making and sensationalism as the world outside Mesoamerica seized upon this date as a harbinger of change, perhaps even of the world's end. The year 2012 became a cultural phenomenon. Books, films and documentaries proclaimed that the Maya had predicted an apocalypse, that the completion of the cycle marked the destruction of the Earth. Some claimed that great cosmic alignments would occur, unleashing floods, earthquakes or solar storms. Others suggested more spiritual interpretations, speaking of a global awakening of consciousness, a transition to a new age of enlightenment. For a time, the notion of the Maya prophecy captured imaginations around the world, turning an ancient system of timekeeping into a symbol of mystery and doom. Yet when we look carefully at what the Maya actually believed, a different picture emerges. For the Maya, the ending of a Bacton was not the end of the world in a catastrophic sense. It was a moment of renewal, the completion of one great cycle and the beginning of another. Just as the calendar round renewed itself every 52 years, so too did the long count renew itself after thousands of years. The end of the 13th Bacton was to the Maya an extraordinary moment, but not one of despair. It was a chance to honor the gods, to perform rituals of transition, and to welcome the unfolding of a new era. The idea of cycles ending and beginning again is deeply rooted in Maya thought. In their mythology, worlds had been created and destroyed before, each cycle giving way to another. Human beings lived within the current creation, one shaped by divine sacrifice and sustained through ritual. To complete a Bacton was to acknowledge that time itself was alive, that creation was ongoing, and that human life was part of an eternal rhythm. Rather than predicting destruction, the calendar spoke of continuity, of the eternal turning of the great cosmic wheel. The modern misinterpretations of 2012 reveal as much about us as they do about the Maya. In a world accustomed to seeing time as linear, with a clear beginning and an inevitable end, it is easy to cast the closing of a cycle as final, as apocalyptic. We tend to imagine endings as permanent, dramatic, and catastrophic. For the Maya, however, endings were always tied to beginnings. To them, the completion of a cycle was not the collapse of existence but its renewal. The misunderstanding lies in our inability to step into their cyclical view of time, one that is at once humbling and reassuring. When December 21, 2012 arrived, the world did not end. The sun rose and set as it always had, and life continued. Yet in Maya communities, ceremonies were indeed held. Fires were lit, prayers were spoken, and offerings were made to honor the passing of the Bacton. For them it was a moment of profound importance, not because the world was ending but because time had turned and a new cycle had begun. These rituals, quiet and respectful, were far removed from the panic and spectacle that dominated global media. They reflected the true heart of the Maya calendar: reverence for cycles, for renewal, for the ongoing dialogue between human beings and the cosmos. The fascination with 2012, however, did have one lasting effect. It drew the attention of millions to the existence of the Maya and their extraordinary achievements. While much of the coverage was steeped in misunderstanding, it nonetheless inspired many to learn more about this ancient civilization, to explore its art, its cities, and its deep philosophy of time. In this way, the sensationalism surrounding 2012 inadvertently served as an introduction, leading some to discover the true richness of Maya culture beyond the headlines. Today, scholars, archaeologists, and modern Maya communities continue to correct these misconceptions, emphasizing the difference between apocalyptic fantasy and cultural reality. The calendar endures not as a prediction of doom but as a reminder of humanity's connection to cycles greater than ourselves. To think of 2012 as an ending misses the point. To see it as a renewal brings us closer to the Maya vision of time. In reflecting on this moment, we are reminded that every culture frames time differently. For the Maya, cycles gave life meaning, anchoring human experience within the vast rhythms of the cosmos. For us, caught in a world that often sees time as a race toward an uncertain future, this perspective can feel both foreign and calming. It suggests that life is not a line rushing toward an end but a circle that turns endlessly, bringing loss and renewal in equal measure. The 2012 phenomenon, then, is not simply a story of misunderstanding. It is also a story of how ancient wisdom still resonates, even when refracted through the lens of modern fears and hopes. The Maya did not predict the end of the world, but they did leave us with a vision of time that challenges our assumptions. Their calendar, with its cycles of days, years, and millennia, invites us to see ourselves as part of something larger, something eternal. And in that vision, there is not fear but peace. If we step back from the grand cycles of Bacons and cosmic alignments, we find that the Maya calendar was not just a system for kings and priests but a living framework that shaped the rhythms of daily existence. Every Maya community, from the bustling cities to the smaller villages, lived within the structure of sacred and solar time. Days were not empty containers to be filled, but living moments with character, meaning, and guidance. Each day carried a personality, determined by the sacred count of the Selkan, and that personality influenced the way people approached their tasks, their rituals, and even their decisions. Imagine a farmer rising before dawn, the stars still linger overhead, and the faint light of Venus glows on the horizon. As he prepares to walk to his fields, he is aware of the day's sacred sign, perhaps named after a jaguar or a serpent, a sign associated with strength, caution, or wisdom. This knowledge does not determine his actions in a rigid way, but it frames his outlook. If the day is seen as auspicious for planting, he may sow new seeds. If the sign warns of caution, he might wait, or perhaps take the day to prepare tools rather than begin a major task. In this way, the calendar infused the ordinary labor of farming with meaning, turning daily work into a dialogue with the universe. The same was true in other aspects of life. Birthdays, for example, were far more than annual celebrations. In the Maya world, the most important moment was the exact day on which a person was born within the 260-day cycle of the Silken. That day's character was believed to shape the essence of the individual, influencing their personality, their destiny, and even their role in the community. A child born on a day associated with the eagle might be seen as destined for vision and leadership, while one born on a day linked to water could be tied to healing or renewal. Families often consulted priests or daykeepers who interpreted the meaning of the day and provided guidance for how the child might live in harmony with their sacred time. This practice gave daily life a layer of intimacy with the cosmos. To the Maya, the universe was not distant or abstract. It was present in the turning of days, in the alignment of planets, in the rituals of planting and harvest. Each action was an offering to balance and sustain the order of creation. Time was alive, and to ignore its rhythms was to risk falling out of harmony with the world. In villages, daykeepers held a respected role. These were individuals trained to count the days, to keep the sacred calendar alive, and to advise others on the meanings woven into time. They did not see themselves as fortune tellers in the modern sense but as interpreters of cycles, helping their communities navigate life with awareness. People would approach them for guidance on marriages, journeys, or the best timing for rituals. Through their work, the great cosmic cycles were brought down to the human scale, ensuring that even the smallest decision could be framed within a larger order. Festivals and ceremonies, too, were anchored in the calendar. The Hab, with its solar cycle of 365 days, marked the turning of seasons and the timing of agricultural events. Planting festivals celebrated the beginning of the rains, while harvest ceremonies honored the maize that sustained life. In these moments, entire communities gathered, dancing, singing, and offering gifts to the gods. Fire flickered in temple courtyards, smoke from incense rose into the air, and the rhythm of drums echoed through the night. These gatherings were both joyous and solemn, acts of gratitude that reminded people that their survival depended on their relationship with time, with nature, and with the divine. Even the way cities were built reflected the influence of the calendar. Temples and plazas often aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and important celestial events. When the sun rose or set at precise points in the horizon, casting shadows along temple stairs or illuminating carved panels, it was a reminder that human structures were woven into the great architecture of the sky. For those living in these cities, the turning of the heavens was not an abstract idea but a spectacle they could witness, a living demonstration of the calendar's power in stone and light. The integration of the calendar into daily life also fostered resilience. In times of drought or hardship, people could look to the cycles for reassurance. Just as one season passed into another, so too would difficulty give way to renewal. Rituals performed at the right time were believed to strengthen the community, to restore balance, and to invite the favor of the gods. In this way, the calendar was not only a measure of time but a tool for survival, giving meaning to suffering and hope for renewal. Perhaps one of the most striking aspects of this system is how it blurred the line between the sacred and the ordinary. For the Maya, there was no strict divide between religion and daily life, between work and ritual. Everything was part of a larger whole. To plant maize was not just an agricultural task but an offering. To celebrate a birthday was not merely to mark age but to recognize destiny. Even the act of counting days was a sacred duty, a way of weaving human experience into the fabric of the cosmos. When we reflect on this integration, we begin to see why the Maya calendar has endured in memory long after the cities of stone began to crumble. It was more than a way of marking years, it was a worldview, a philosophy, a way of living in harmony with cycles far greater than any individual. In this sense, it continues to speak to us today. In a world where time often feels fragmented, rushed, and linear, the Maya vision offers a calming alternative. It reminds us that each day carries meaning, that endings and beginnings are never far apart, and that human life can be lived with reverence for the cycles that sustain us. In daily life, then, the Maya calendar was not distant or abstract but immediate and intimate. It was the rhythm of footsteps in the field, the guidance whispered by a daykeeper, the joy of festivals and the solemnity of offerings. It was time lived not as a burden or a race, but as a circle, always turning, always bringing renewal, and in that circle, the Maya found both meaning and peace. As we arrive at the end of this long exploration of the Maya calendar, it is worth pausing to consider not just the details of cycles and counts but the deeper meaning behind them. What we have traced is not only a system of timekeeping but a worldview, one that placed human life within a grand cyclical rhythm. To the Maya, time was not an endless race forward nor a fragile thread destined to snap. Instead, it was a circle, forever turning, filled with both endings and beginnings. This way of thinking continues to hold a quiet power, even as centuries separate us from the people who first carved glyphs into stone and watched the skies with careful devotion. The Maya calendar has endured in human memory because it is more than mathematics, more than astronomy, more than history. It is a reminder of perspective. The Maya saw themselves as part of something vast, part of cycles that stretched far beyond a single lifetime. Their calendars gave them a way to measure, yes, but also to belong. Each day carried meaning, each season carried significance, and each great cycle was a reminder that the universe was alive with patterns that humans could witness, honor, and join. As we think of their legacy, we must also acknowledge how fragile the record has been. Much of what we know comes from fragments, from carved stelae, painted codices, and the accounts of later scribes who struggled to preserve memory in the face of conquest and loss. So much was destroyed, yet enough survived to let us glimpse their brilliance. That survival itself feels like part of the story, a testament to resilience, to the endurance of knowledge even in the face of erasure. The Maya calendar continues to be studied, not only by scholars but by the descendants of the Maya themselves, who still carry forward traditions of counting days, of honoring cycles, and of finding guidance in the sacred flow of time. The modern fascination with the Maya calendar, particularly around the year 2012, may have been shaped by misunderstanding, but it also speaks to a deep human longing. In a world where time often feels like a relentless march, where hours and days blur into deadlines and schedules, there is comfort in the idea that time can be cyclical, renewing itself endlessly. The Maya vision reminds us that no ending is final, that every closing is also an opening. The rising sun is always followed by another dawn, the passing season always gives way to growth, and life itself is part of a rhythm that never ceases. As we conclude this story, imagine standing at one of the great Maya sites, perhaps at dawn. The first light spills across the carved steps of a temple, and shadows fall just as they did centuries ago, when priests watched the horizon with care. The stones are weathered, but they still hold memory. They remind us that once people gathered here to mark time, to celebrate, to grieve, to plant, to harvest, and to honor the gods who shaped their world. In that moment, the distance between past and present fades, the same sun rises, the same cycles turn, and we too stand within time's circle. The Maya calendar's legacy is not only historical but philosophical. It asks us to reconsider our relationship with time. What if we viewed our days not as rushing forward into an unknown end but as part of a pattern that repeats, offering chances for renewal? What if we honored small cycles, the rhythm of seasons, the turning of days, the renewal that comes with each dawn, as sacred as meaningful? In such a view, life becomes less hurried, less burdened by finality, and more attuned to continuity and harmony. This is why the Maya calendar continues to capture imagination. It speaks to a universal truth that we are part of something larger, and that time itself is a partner in the story of life, not merely a measure of its passing. The Maya may be gone as an empire, their cities left to the forest, but their way of seeing time endures, offering wisdom to those willing to listen. And so, as we close this journey, let us carry with us a quiet lesson from the Maya. Time is not a line that leaves us behind, but a circle that always returns. Endings are never final, they are invitations to begin again. Just as the Maya honored the passing of each cycle with ritual and reverence, so too can we find meaning in the turning of our own days. The calendar of the Maya, mysterious and profound, is not only a relic of the past but a gentle reminder for the present, that we are never lost in time, but always part of its eternal flow.